Hello and welcome to Thyros Web Development Tips and Tutorials. I'm excited about today's video because we're going to learn so much by building this simple yet brilliant coming soon page using Tailwind CSS and Alpine JS. We have a countdown timer here, some description, an email input with a floating label, and a footer with some social links. And of course, this page is responsive. Let's get started. This video is sponsored by Showcase, a professional network built for people who code to connect, build community, and find new opportunities. Hang out with like minded individuals, share your knowledge, and build your own community. You can share blogs, videos, projects, code snippets, and short messages. If you are a content creator, you can grow your own audience and make some money through paid subscribers. Join me and thousands of developers on Showcase today. Let me give you a quick summary of the things you will be learning in this video. So, with respect to Tailwind CSS, you will be learning how to build various components with Flexbox. You will learn how to add custom fonts, responsive layouts, arbitrary styles using the latest JIT compiler, and then floating label for input using sibling selector. This is a new one. And with respect to Alpine JS, you will learn how to build a countdown timer step by step. So even if you know nothing about Alpine JS and if you don't choose to use Alpine in your web page, a lot of the code is in vanilla JavaScript. So you can easily pick it up, and even if you like to use something like Vue, you can easily do it on your own. Also, you must know that this is a template developed by Innovatic, which is available in Bootstrap for free download on their website. If you wish to have that template, the link is in the description below. Now let's start. We will be using the latest version of Tailwind CSS, which is v2.2.4 as of recording this video. And we will be using some of the latest features of just-in-time mode. To get started with a new project, I will not walk you through the installation process. You can check out my latest video linked here for installing Tailwind as a post-CSS plugin. So in order to start off quickly, I have this repository on GitHub. I use this as a boilerplate. You can find this link in the description below. So let me copy this link. Open terminal or command prompt or iterm in your system, and let's clone this project. I will cd into the desktop folder, and here git clone, paste that link. Let me call it coming soon. Once that's done, let me cd into coming soon, and I want to open this in Visual Studio Code. So code space dot. So if you've cloned the project, this is what you will receive. Here's the public folder with index.html, our main web page, and this is linked to styles.css, which has the minimum base styles. We will anyway build this. To get started, let me open terminal here. Let's start with an npm install. This will help us install all the dependencies mentioned here. These are the dev dependencies. We have Tailwind CSS, Post CSS, CSS Nano for minimizing the final CSS file, and then auto prefixer that's required for Tailwind CSS. Great. Now that this is done, you can see that we use the build script to watch all the files while we are building. So let's do npm run build, and this will start watching all the files. Now let's open our index.html, close this, and let's just minimize everything. Open this in live server to make sure it's working. Yes, so we have this in purple and a bold font, so this is working. Now let's remove all of this here, and I will open up the required template on the right side. As I mentioned, this is the free template by Innovatic that we will be cloning today. So I'd like to open this live preview, put this on the side of VS Code like this. Let me open this in responsive mode and maybe an iPhone 6 or 7. Okay, so here we have this and we have our web page here. Okay, let me save this. Now we have a blank page. Let's open this also in responsive mode. Great. First thing is I would like to change this title and I would say petals coming soon page. Right, so the first thing I usually do is add a class to body that is anti-aliased. This makes the fonts look smoother, so you always add this. And now the first thing we notice is this beautiful vibrant background image that we need to add to cover the entire page. And this is a background that is available in svgbackgrounds.com. So let's go down to find this background. Yeah, here it is. And yes, so you can use it in multiple ways. You can download the SVG. Instead, I would just like to copy this CSS. And let me close this. The very first thing we do is add a div with a class width full. This is actually not needed because it's anyway full width, but I'll add it. And min height screen so that it occupies at least 100% of the viewport. And let me add a custom class saying BG home. I'm bad at naming things, which is why I use Tailwind. So for this BG home, let's go to our custom style sheet, which is tailwind.css. Currently, there are no custom styles. So let's add them within the layer components. So BG home is where we add whatever we just copied from SVG backgrounds. Okay, so yes, we have it here. The problem is we have to mention the background position because it doesn't seem to be centered. So the background position is center. All right, so this is mostly the custom CSS that we're going to add. Everything else will be in Tailwind itself. Let's go back to our index file. We have our background set, and the first thing we notice is the countdown timer. Of course, the functionality will be added using Alpine JS, but for now, let's have the look. And if you notice, we can do this using grid or flex, but I would choose to use flex here because that's how you get them together. I find it easier. Right, so let's add another div here, and this will be our countdown timer. Div class flex, and we need to set flex wrap. Now let's create these individual circles. So which would be BG white with a background opacity. So background opacity of maybe 20, I don't know, let's see. And then a width, let's try 10, h10. Let's see what we get here. Okay, let's try width 20, h20. Let's obviously say rounded full. And now we don't want this to be sticking to the top. So what we do is add a padding right here. So a vertical padding of 8 and a horizontal padding of 8 again, maybe. Or a vertical padding of 12. And flex wrap, we also want it to horizontally center, so we use justify center. And this height and width is not sufficient, so let's try W24 and H24. A little smaller, but I think 28 will be a little big. So what we do is we use some arbitrary values here. So let's say I would like something like 26 here. So that in Tailwind is usually, I think it's 6.5 rem, and height also would be 6.5 rem. Yeah, now we have something that we need. So the text within, let me add it in a span. Let's say 00 for now. It's text white, font bold, and then text 3XL maybe. Of course, this needs to appear in the center. Let's do that. Text 4XL. Yeah, text 4XL should be fine. We want this to be horizontally and vertically centered. So what I would do is add a flex container here and then add another div within which I'd like to add this span and also the other span that we need, which is days. Oh, sorry. This is again text white. So what I'll do is add text white right here. And this is probably text small. And of course, let's make this block, display block, so it appears one below the other. And now to make it appear in the center, we can simply use M auto, margin auto, so that fixes it. But also we need to add a text center, so the text is center aligned. All right. So this looks like what it is. Of course, now you would immediately notice that the font is not same. So let's see which font this is. Let's inspect element. And yes, this is Open Sans. So quickly, let's go to fonts.google.com and import the Open Sans font. Yes, here it is. Open Sans. We would want the regular one and then maybe the darkest, which is extra bold. Select. So select the regular and the extra bold. We would not need any italics font. That's about it. Now, I would like to use the import option. So copy this line and then come back to your custom style sheet. You can paste this above everything else. And in the config file now, to use this font, let's go to tailwind.config.js. Let's go to the documentation of Tailwind and see how to customize. So let me say customize custom fonts. So I go to font family, and here you can notice that you can add this font family, but if you add it within theme and not within the extent, the existing fonts will not appear, which is totally fine for us. But anyway, to be on the safer side, let's add this within the extend block so we can use the existing fonts if needed. Font family, and I would like to call it maybe primary font, and this would be Open Sans. Oh, sorry. And then sans serif. Okay, now let's test if this works. And to do that, for the body itself, let me change the font to font primary, right? So you will notice that this immediately changed. Now inspect element to check if our font has been changed, and let's go to computer, let's go to fonts and to see that yes, font Open Sans extra bold is what is appearing here. Open Sans extra bold is what we see here. Maybe I was wrong at judging. We don't need extra bold. Let's go back to using bold, which might be 700. Yeah, so this is much similar to what we need. Great. Go back to index .html. Now it's more like it. I think the opacity is a little lower, so we can change this to opacity 10. Yeah, that's more like it. So what we'll do is we'll extract all these classes, because we will be having 4 of these, and if we need to change some styles, we'll have to change it in 4 places, which is not so good. So let's call this timer circle. Yeah, timer circle. Copy all of this, and here this is also a component. Timer circle. Apply this. Yes, we have it. And then you could say timer circle div, and then apply text white, text center, and margin auto. And then timer count, and then timer type, that's what we could call them, will be this. So this is timer count, and apply, and this is timer type. Apply. All right, so we have the set, and now we can easily copy this. Sorry, this part we can easily copy it 3 more times, and then change this to hours, minutes, and then seconds. Okay, so this is what we have. Definitely we need some gap, and we can simply use the gap utilities in Tailwind and say gap 4. Now we have something like this, which is great. This part is done, but if you notice, when you increase the screen width for larger screen sizes, the circle and the font size are bigger, and then when you go even larger, it further increases. So let's also implement that now. Let's go here, and at MD breakpoint, the width increases to maybe 7.5 rem, and then height also would be 7.5 rem. Let's just check. Let's check the size first and later the fonts. Yeah, the size looks quite fine. And this timer count at MD breakpoint would be text 5XL. Then the same thing at LG breakpoint would be width, I'm guessing 8.5 rem, and height also at 8.5 rem. Right? So this is how you go. You go mobile first, and everything is easier. This is what it is, and this is what ours looks like. Yeah, I think the text is even bigger here. Let's see if 6XL would be too much. All right, that looks perfect. Great, so we have our responsive styles also done. Let's go back to the iPhone size here as well, and here as well. So our countdown part is done. That is, the look is complete. Of course, we'll add the functionality towards the end. So this is done. Let me just collapse this and add a comment here. Countdown timer ends. On to the next section. So the next section is we have a heading and a paragraph. Let's add that into a div, h1, which says project coming soon. And then we have a paragraph, which is this. Let's copy it. Okay, and now we have some margin here. So let's say empty 8, margin top 8, and the H1 would be font bold, text 4XL or maybe 5XL, and then this paragraph would have some margin as well, so maybe we could give it a padding top 4, and then text XL should be good. Alright, so looks like the sizes are fine. We need to fix the colors. So here again we can add text white right here and then text center. Okay, it's slightly smaller, so text 4XL should do. Yeah, so this is fine. A little difference in the text size doesn't matter. We're not trying to be pixel perfect here. This again, when let's work on the responsiveness now. That is, when you go to the MD, the font size is increasing, and LG, does it further increase? No, that's it. The paragraph size also increases at MD, I believe. So let's do that. MD text to Excel. This would be MD text 5XL. Okay, so even if it's not right, it's okay. Let's stick to this and continue to the more important parts of the page. Yeah, all right, so that looks more like it. On to the next section, which is the email form. All right, so this will be another, now this can directly be a form element and class. First thing is margin top, which is probably 8. And now within the form, we have the email input and the sign up button, which you saw that on the desktop, they both are stacked next to each other. So let's implement that also. So first, let's have the input type is email and placeholder is email address. Input ID would be email. And then let's add some styles to it. Class px, that is padding in the horizontal direction, is something like maybe 8, and then py 4, then rounded corners, so rounded full. Let me open that here, and then width full. Okay, then the placeholder color is different. That also we have a utility class which is placeholder gray, I think 700. Yeah, so that is fine. Let's do the functionality of the floating label in a few minutes, but first let's also add this button here, that is sign up button. So button type equals submit. It says sign up. Let's add the background color, which is probably pink, BG pink 800, text white, uppercase, font bold, text SM, text center. Right, let's see what we got. Okay, obviously width full, and then the same padding should work. px8, py4. Why didn't that work? Sorry. Yeah, width full, px8, py4. Of course, we need a margin top, maybe mt4, and rounded full as well. Okay, so that's almost what it is. Great. Let's see how we can make this responsive. So as we move beyond the MD breakpoint here, so that is when it hits this breakpoint, it's going to stack one next to the other. So we can do that using Flex, and that's another component which is very useful because you will see this on a lot of websites. That is email input or some input on the left and then a button on the right. So for that, in the form, let's say at MD breakpoint, we'll add the Flex class and see what happens. So this is what happens immediately. They get stacked next to each other. So we need to remove the rounded corners on the right for the input and rounded corners on the left for sign up. So here for the input, we say MD rounded right none. Okay, that fixes it there. And for the button, we say MD, let me just add this at the end. Okay, yeah, we say MD rounded rounded L none. That is on the left side. I don't need any rounded corners. So there's one problem here. Instead of using padding for input and button, let's use some height. So instead of padding, let's say H12 or no, H14. Yeah, that looks better. Same here as well, H14. And then we need to remove this margin top at MD breakpoint. So let's say MD 0. Great. Now there's just one thing that we need to fix. The width of the sign up button is the same as the width of our input. That's not what we need. We need this email input to occupy a lot more space and the button to occupy very little space, only as much as it's needed. The best way to do that, or rather the only way to do that with Flex, is set the Flex grow to 1 for this input. Okay, that's the hack here. So what we do is just say Flex grow, that utility class sets it to 1. And when you do this, you will probably have to remove W full here. So you say empty W auto, and yes. But when you do this, this occupies very little space. So instead of saying W auto, let's give some width like, W48, I'm not sure. Is that too much? No, that looks quite like it. Yeah, so W48 is great. So we have this look in small screens, and for larger screens, we have what we need. But there must be something you must have noticed that here we have the width restricted to only so much, which looks better than what we have right now. So let's add a max width. Let me open it in separate tabs. That's looking too small. So here the width is limited. So at MD breakpoint, the width is limited to so much, and at probably LG, it's limited. Let's add that. And that can be added in a separate div, which I'd like to do now. So wrap everything that we have right now within another div just to limit the width. So let's say at MD breakpoint, max width maybe 4XL, and at LG breakpoint, max width 6XL. We need to fix this. And then MX auto, that is, put that in the center. Okay, we'll see. Now this didn't do anything. So maybe 2XL and 3XL. Yeah, that's quite better. All right, but we also see that this whole div is limited. This is looking too wide. So let's add a width, max width to the font, to the form itself. And we can add that at MD, max width XL. And then let's say margin auto. Okay. Yeah. So this looks great. Now I think this font is a little too big. I'm sorry. So let's just change that one last time. Text Excel, and let me make this text LG. This is much better. Right. Just one last change. Uh, Probably not Excel. Let me make max width LG. And yes, I think this looks a lot better now. We have the countdown timer, we have this section ready. We only have the footer to make. Let's do that now. Let's add a footer. We first have an image, which I have it on my desktop folder. So let me copy it. So this logo will be copied into the coming soon page, public, and let's create a new folder, images, and let me add it into that. Okay, so now we can use the logo here, images, logo, svg. Let's add some height to it, maybe h12. We will see what that looks like. And yeah, that's a little bigger, so maybe h10, and then it has an opacity of maybe 80. Yeah, of course we need to center it, so let me do mx auto, and we have some of these social links for which I'm going to use Font Awesome. So let me paste the code that I received from Font Awesome, and now I can use those icons here. Let me put that into another div and say mx auto here as well, and those will be links, class inline block, and href is hash. So this is what it gives us. So we need the circle and these icons in pink. What we will do is say inline block width 8 maybe, h8, and then say text, sorry, pg white, and background opacity 80, text pink 800. Let's see what this gives us. Yeah, we need text center and rounded full. All right, it's slightly bigger, so maybe W9 and H9 will do. And then we need to vertically center this again. So let me add a flex here and then do M auto. Then we can remove text center also. Yeah, this gives us everything in, this gives us the icon in the center. I think this font is slightly big. So let's say text LG, and this should do. Great, so the icon is perfect. Let's change the placement. But I'm also thinking we can add text ping 800 right here and also text LG right here. Then everything else can be extracted into saying social link as a class. And here, apply, paste those styles. And let's see if everything is preserved. Yeah, this is great. So let's copy this 4 more times, and I'm going to go quickly through this. You should know how to use this anyway. Right, so we have all the different icons here. Let's place them next to each other. For that, here in the social link, let's change flex to inline flex. So the container will behave like an inline element stacking next to each other. Yep, that's what we have. We need some more space between them. And yeah, I'm sorry, this does look like width 10 and height 10. Yeah, this looks like the size. And for the space, what we could do is we have this wonderful utility class in Tailwind that is SpaceX utility. So you say SpaceX 2 or 3, and it adds some spacing between them. So I guess spacing 2 is better. All right. And now for the placement, we want this centered. So since these are inline block elements, we can simply add text center, and that should do the trick. Some margin above these icons, so we can do MD4. Right. Now this footer, if you notice, if the height of the screen increases, so something like, let me use portrait mode here to show you, if the height of the screen increases, even then the footer is at the bottom, right? So regardless of the height of the screen, the footer is at the bottom. And how do we do that? So here is where the flex layout is very helpful. We have to make this entire div a flex container and then somehow make sure that this footer stays at the end of the page. Let's do that now. So this is the div that we use to restrict the width, and we can make this the flex container. So let's say flex, and here this time the direction will be column. So flex column. Let's see what that does already. So that messes up everything because we have multiple divs here. So the whole countdown timer and these forms and everything go into one div. And then the footer will be in another div. Okay. So this looks like it's the same thing, but now to this flex container, let's add a min height screen instead of adding it here. We can remove it from there now. What it does is it makes sure that this div occupies the minimum height of the screen, otherwise the footer won't be at the end if the content is smaller than the height of the screen, height of the viewport. And then what we need to do is use the justify items property to add as much space as possible between these two, right? So min height screen, justify between. Right? Now you will notice that this is at the end of the page, and the reason this is occupying more height than the minimum, than the height of the screen, is maybe because we have this padding here. So let's remove this padding from here and add it here instead. Yeah, so that fixes it. Let's check if it's responsive. Oh yeah, we need some margin here just in case the height is smaller. Let's add that to the footer. Footer class MD8. Right, so on mobile screens, this is what it looks like. Perfect, right? And on large desktops, we have this. Then on maybe an iPad in the portrait orientation, this is what we've got. That's what we need. This is perfect now. We have just two things to complete. One is the floating label and the other one is the countdown timer, right? So for floating label, we don't need any JavaScript. This is a pure CSS implementation, or rather a Tailwind CSS implementation. And let's see how that is done. So when you need the floating label, there is an actual label that you need to add which acts as a placeholder. So right now we're using the actual placeholder attribute to display this email address, but we will not use the placeholder. Instead, we will make the label appear here, and then when you focus on this element, we will make the label go up. Okay. So to do that, first let's add a label. Here's the input. Let's add a label for email. The text is email address. So when you simply add a label, this is where it appears because we're using flex. Since we don't want three elements here, what I'll do is I'll wrap the label and input within the div. What this does is it adds the email address here. We'll quickly change that by setting the position to absolute. And for that to work, we need to have relative class here, right? The moment you do this, yeah, you will notice that the email address comes up here. So let's make this label look exactly like the placeholder and place it exactly in this position. That would be text gray 700, because that's the placeholder color. And then since it's absolute position, we can say left 8 and then top 4 maybe. Yeah, so it's actually exactly right here. To see that, you can remove placeholder and then test that. Now this is the, yeah, this is the label. You can actually select it, right? So this is not the placeholder anymore, this is the label, but we need the placeholder as well. I'll tell you why. Now here we're going to use the sibling selector and a pseudo class which is placeholder shown. Now if you want to know more details about it, you can go to the MDN documents and check for placeholder shown pseudo class to read more about it. So we're going to use this pseudo class to check that, if there is any element with an active placeholder, then this style applies. Now in our case, if the placeholder is shown, that means when the user has not typed anything, we want the label to be right here. But when the placeholder is not shown, we want the label to go up, correct? But we need to make changes to the label element, and the placeholder pseudo class applies to the input element. Okay, that's where the pure variants of Tailwind CSS comes into picture. Let me open the documentation and show it to you. You can find the pure variants in the JIT docs, that is the sibling selector variants, right? So this is what we need to do now. Add a pure class to input. Okay, and now for the peer of this, that is for its sibling, you can use this utility class pure placeholder shown and then give the styles that you want. So let's say pure placeholder shown. If you want to hide this hidden, you can do that, but this won't work yet. This won't work because the sibling selector works only when the sibling comes after this element, right? So we'll have to change the order. It doesn't matter because we're using absolute position anyway. So the display won't change. And now let's see if this works. That is, when the placeholder is shown, hide the label, but again, you won't be able to see anything. Let's inspect and see if this works. Right, so since the placeholder is shown, this is hidden. Let me start typing something. Yeah, so you see, the moment I start typing something, this is visible. Okay, if I remove this, this gets hidden. Yeah, so now let's add the real styles. Now that you understood how this works, let's add the styles required. So when the placeholder is shown, I want it exactly where it is. So instead of hidden, I want it at offset 4 from the top. But otherwise, I want it to be on top of the input. Okay, so let's see if this works. Yeah, so when I start typing, it comes here. And I also want this to be bold and much smaller when the placeholder is not shown. So font bold and text XS. Right, so yes, this is what it is. And let's push down this input a little more. So for that, I cannot use height now. I'll have to use the vertical padding. So maybe padding top 6 and padding bottom 4. Let's see. No, padding top 5 and padding bottom 3. Yeah, that looks perfect. But when we remove this, this placeholder is also visible. Now to change that, let's not remove the placeholder, because if we remove it, then this will not work. Okay, if there is no placeholder, then this utility class surely won't work. So instead of removing the placeholder, let's just change the color to placeholder transparent. Now that's not visible, but also we need to bring this back to where it was. So pure placeholder shown top 4, then we don't need font bold now, so let's change it back to font normal, and then the font size also needs to be base, text base. We will see if this works. Yeah, so when you haven't typed anything, this is what it looks like. When you start typing, it goes up. Great, this is the functionality we need with just one slight modification. That is, the moment you click on this, you want this to move up, not when you start typing, right? Just to do that, we can also use the peer focus utility class. So when it is focused, we want it to move up, right? So peer focus, top 2, and then these 2 things as well with peer focus. Okay, one last time, let's see how this works. Yes, the moment you click on it, we'll be able to type with the label going up. Okay, just one last UX addition, that is, when you take your cursor on this, you will see that the cursor remains a pointer. We don't want it, we want this to change to text. So that can be changed by changing the cursor for this. Cursor text. Okay, yeah, great. So this is our floating label beautifully working right now. So the complete styling is done. Now we just need to make the countdown timer work. For that, let's go to the Alpine JS documentation, which would be alpinejs.dev. Dive in. Let's go to installation. Pick up the CDN. Paste that here. And now we can use Alpine JS. So here we go. Our entire functionality will need to be done here. So let's add some X data. And since the functionality is quite huge, let's not do it inline. Let's instead extract the function and add a function in a script tag below and use that. So let's just call it timer here. Come down to the bottom, add a script tag, and this would be function timer. So this function timer returns an object, and that's where all the variables go, which would have otherwise been in X data. And what are the variables? We need days, which would be 0, 0 to begin with, and then hours, also 0, 0, minutes, 0, sorry, and then seconds, again 0, 0. Okay, so if we just add this much, we can now remove this hard-coded here and instead say x text equals days, and the same thing goes to all the other counters as well, of course. So this would be seconds, this would be minutes, remove this, this would be hours, remove this. Let's just check if this works, and yes, it does. Now we need an end date for the end date and an end time for the counter, right? So that would be end time, and this you can specify as a string. So something like, let's say December 31st 2021, and you need a time, of course. So let's say end of December 31st 2021, so that would be 23 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds. So just when this happens in your time zone, that's when you probably want to launch your website. So this is the time we add, and now we need a time zone. So since my time zone is India, I would say GMT plus 5:30. That's what it is. You can change this to your time zone because this would be your time, right? And now this is a string. This needs to be converted to a date object. And the way to do that is just pass this into the date object. And then we need to get the time in milliseconds. So that would be get time. This gets you the time in milliseconds. And to calculate the difference between the end time and now, you need the time now. So the variable now would be just new date. If you don't pass anything here, that is the time now dot get time. Okay, so that gives us now. Now to actually calculate the difference and calculate the left days, hours and minutes, we need a function, right? So let's add a function here which would be say countdown. That's a function. And here let's actually calculate the difference in time. So we'll add that also as a variable. So time left, let that be 0. Let me add that here. Time left is 0 to start with because we have all the 0, 0, right? And here let's say this dot time left equals end time minus now. This will give us the total number of milliseconds left. Now if we want seconds, we can say divided by 1000. Okay, this gives us the time left. Now how do you get the number of seconds? That is the one in the last counter. If you divide it by 60, if you divide the seconds by 60, the remainder gives you the remaining seconds. So this dot seconds would be time left percentage 60. Okay, because that gives us the remainder. And then this dot minutes would be time left divided by 60. Divided by 60 would give us the hours, but percentage 60 will give us the remaining minutes. Similarly, this dot hours would be time left divided by 60 into 60 percentage 24. So divided by 24 will actually give us the days, and then the remainder is the hours, right? So percentage 24, and then this dot days would be whatever I just said, that is divided by 24, which is nothing but this. Okay, but the problem is this would give us some fractions. We need the integers, so we'll have to use math.floor for all of these. Math.floor, math.floor, and math.floor. Okay. Okay, one thing we forgot is end time needs to be accessed using the this keyword, and so same for now, same for time left. Otherwise, none of this will work. And now this countdown function has to be called when it's initialized, right? So right next to x data, let's add x in it and actually call the function. And now notice we haven't yet started the timer, so it will not start ticking the seconds, minutes, nothing will be dynamic. It will just show the time left once. Okay, we'll see if this works. Yeah, so this is working. It's showing and it's working because if you refresh the page, you see the seconds actually change. Okay, now we just need to use the set interval, and every second we need to update this. So let's use set interval, and within the arrow function we will add all of this, and then here actually set the interval in milliseconds, which is 1000 milliseconds or 1 second. So every 1 second we are going to calculate this, and this will automatically update the seconds and minutes there because we are using xtext. The only other thing we need to add here is we need to change this now. We need to calculate this variable now every single second, right? Because that is what changes. This dot now equals the same thing, new date dot get time. All right, so this should work. Let's see. Yeah, so this is working. In fact, it is updating every second. Great. So did you notice that now this is in single digits? It looks great if we have double digits. So instead of showing 0 minutes, if it shows 00, that would be great. So to format that, let's use another function called format. And let's take in a value here. If the value is less than 10, that's when we would want to add a 0, right? So just return 0 plus value, and instead of having math.floor here, we can have it here instead and just use a format. Okay, change this to format. Right, let's see if this works. Okay, this is not working, maybe because we need to use the this keyword, this dot format, and of course else return math dot floor value. Yeah, so this is working. You can see that it's returning 0 2 0 3 and so on. Otherwise it returns 59 58 and so on. So that's about it. Everything is great. We just have to take care of one thing, that just in case the time is up and you haven't launched your site, or if the person is still seeing the coming soon page, we should not see a negative countdown, right? So if the end time, if the time left is negative, then we should stop the countdown. So here within the set interval function, let's check if this dot time left is less than or equal to 0, then we need to clear this interval. For that, we need to first assign this interval to something. So let counter equals set interval, so on, and here we can say clear interval counter. Also, let's set all of these values to 0 0. Seconds is 0 0. Minutes, hours, and then days. Okay, let's check if this is working. To check that, let's change the date to 2020, a past date, and yeah, you will see that the counter doesn't work. Right, so let's change it back to 2021, and we have everything complete. So this is your coming soon page, which is fully functional, fully responsive, and I hope you learned a lot here. We learned how to implement the counter in Alpine JS. We learned so many flex layouts, so many different utility classes you might not know of. So if you loved this video, do let me know how you found it. I know it was quite lengthy, but it was worth because you learned so much, right? Thank you for watching. Hit a like and share this video ahead. If you enjoyed watching this, don't forget to subscribe below and turn on the notifications so you won't miss a single video from Tyrus.